What would you give to heal the world? Your time? Your faith? Your blood? For most clerics, healing is a gift. But for this one, it's a hunger. Welcome to Ctrl+Alt+Build, where we control the dice, alt the meta, and build the legend. This is the Hunger's Chosen, a Dhampir Cleric of Orgresh, the god of devouring. Half vampire, half occultist, and wholly consumed by an endless appetite, this build walks the razor's edge between healer and predator. They're not a priest offering mercy, they're a surgeon of the void, feeding their faith through flesh, frenzy, and forbidden insight. Like every mainline Codex entry, this build began the only way it should, with a handful of dice and absolutely no plan. For this role, fate handed us a combination that feels more like a curse than a character. For ancestry, we have the Strix, a nocturnal hunter, wings born for silence and survival. Our background, Surge investigator focused in occultism, a seeker of magical phenomena, the kind who asks too many questions about the unknown. As mentioned, we are a cleric who is a servant of divine appetite. The appetite of Orgresh the Hungering Maw, god of devouring indulgence and ruinous excess. We also rolled up an archetype, the Psychic. However, the dice were not kind enough to give us access to the free archetype rule this time, so we're going to have to integrate this directly into our class feats. All in all, this is not just a build, but a warning. But at Ctrl+Alt+Build, we don't re-roll the madness. We make it work. And so, from these chaotic dice come the Hunger's Chosen. Part healer, part harbinger, all hunger. Our story begins with a lone Strix investigator, wings casting shadows over tangled forests and forgotten ruins. But this isn't a scholar scribbling in dusty tomes. No, this is a seeker of forbidden knowledge, marked by Dhampir blood and a vow to Orgresh. They travel where hunger leads them, cataloging magical terrain, dissecting the strange, and leaving behind whispers of a winged figure that heals with as much cruelty as compassion. That foundation comes from our unusual combination of a Strix Dhampir cloistered cleric with the Surge investigator background. Altogether, they weave the image of a character who is both scholarly and savage, a spellcaster empowered by divine hunger, and an explorer trained to parse the occult. Their focus is not on strength or charisma, but sharp wit and unyielding will. Wisdom is at a +4 to channel their divine power, dexterity at a +2 to evade and strike swiftly, and intelligence at a +2 to pry open the occult secrets. This breadth is reflected in their skills. They learn to read forests like scripture with survival, nature, and terrain lore, navigate arcane mysteries with arcana, occultism, and religion, and even tend the wounds with hands both gentle and cruel using crafting, medicine, and acrobatics. From the start, the Hunger's Chosen feels less like a priest in a chapel and more like an occult field surgeon recording the world's magic while feeding on its marrow. And Orgresh grants them their first taste of indulgence. With the harmful font, their divine prayers are sharpened into weapons. The indulgence domain unlocks Frenzied Revelry, a focus spell that rushes them with temporary vitality and speed, but like any indulgence, it's meant to be dangerous. Their cantrips immediately help set the tone. Void Warp lashes at life force itself, dealing void damage and leaving enemies enfeebled if they falter. Vitality Lash punishes the corrupted essence, with radiant destruction cutting down both undead and void-touched foes alike. Stabilize allows them to keep someone alive in the event that all of the other healing methods have been exhausted. Inside Ropes, which is grotesque as it sounds, allows us to pull our own guts into a living rope, perfect for climbing and binding, and Shield provides a spectral defense. Their first level spell arsenal reinforces their theme. Enfeeble drains physical strength, turning brutes into stumbling shells, while Harm becomes their signature, channeling void energy to wither the living, heal the undead, or even pulse outward in a 30-foot wave of pain. Imagine a dusk-shrouded forest, where bandits corner a lone traveler beneath the trees. Wings unfurl, black against the last red light of the sun. A whispered word, and void warp cracks their life force apart, leaving one staggering as if their bones had been hollowed. Another lunges forward only to be scorched by Harm, vitality ripped out in a flood of necrotic energy. And then, a ragged grin as frenzied revelry takes hold, speed and strength flooding them with the thrill of excess. Every strike, another hymn to Orgresh's endless hunger. At first level, the Hunger's Chosen is already defined. Not a protector of life, but a predator, cloaked in the vestments of faith, wielding divine magic as a feast rather than a blessing. At second level, the Hunger's Chosen begins to fracture in fascinating ways. The void-hungry cleric's prayers are no longer the only voice. Something else has awakened inside. A current of psychic thought echoes throughout the hollows of their mind. Where others hear silence, they hear whispers. Where others see darkness, they see the endless watch of the infinite eye. In the story, this marks their first true descent into blending divine faith with occult power. The winged investigator, once cataloging landscapes and wounds, now catalogs minds. Glimpses of visions flashing at the edges of perception. The gnawing hunger of Orgresh intertwined with the clarity of psychic insight. Mechanically, this is where we are unlocking our psychic dedication. The chosen conscious mind is the infinite eye, a path of heightened perception and foresight. This shifts part of our casting identity towards intelligence, letting that investigator's sharp mind fuel psychic spells. From this, we gain the innate cantrip Guidance, simple but crucial, granting an ally a bonus to their next check or attack. And when amped, Guidance can offer even greater clarity, pushing our allies or ourselves to succeed at the critical moment. We also deepen our magical awareness with Arcane Sense, letting us detect spells and magical auras instinctively. Story-wise, this is perfect. The character's eyes are never still, catching glimmers of occult residue in places others just see ordinary. Their divine magic grows as well. At this level, they add Mystic Armor, a spell that cloaks the body in protective force, bolstering AC in ways a cloistered cleric desperately needs. And with the psychic casting coming online, Detect Magic becomes an innate cantrip. Another step into their role as the Seer of Hidden Truths. Picture a ruined temple, its stones heavy with silence. The Hunger's Chosen moves through the dust, wings tucked tight, eyes glowing faintly with violet fire. The ground hums. A trap, unseen to others, but laid bare to the infinite eye. A whispered mantra of guidance steals a companion's hand as they step forward, and when the temple's magic flares to life, a quick chant of mystic armor coats their body in a shimmering ward. In this moment, their faith and their mind weave seamlessly together. Hunger and vision, void and sight. Level 2 solidifies the duality identity of this build. Not just a cleric of hunger, but a psychic seer, threading intelligence and willpower into a single unsettling whole. By third level, the Hunger's Chosen turns their gaze inward. For all their void magic and psychic revelations, they are still Dhampir, not quite living, not fully dead, forever walking the threshold. And that means survival demands more than just divine favor. It demands discipline, precision, and hands steady enough to stitch life back together when the void begins to tear it apart. In the story, this is where they lean into the role of a non-magical medic, relying not on Orgresh's gifts, but on their own grim training. In the field, they patch wounds with needle and thread, their dark insight letting them re-knit what magic cannot, especially for themselves, since a Dhampir cannot benefit from ordinary healing magic. This is represented mechanically with an expert increase in religion, solidifying their status as both priest and scholar of the divine. More importantly, however, they take the general feat Stitch Flesh. This lets them restore hit points to undead and void-healed creatures through medicine checks, a perfect thematic fit as it mirrors their ability to treat their own cursed body. In play, this means that the Hunger's Chosen can heal themselves without relying solely on magic, further deepening the theme of indulgence without mercy. Their spellcasting also grows more sinister. At this tier, they gain access to second-rank cleric spells. Swallow Light devours magical illumination, extinguishing radiance with a void-tainted breath. If successful, it fuels a temporary breath weapon, a cone of chilling shadows that lashes out with cold and negative energy, leaving foes shivering and drained. Darkness shrouds the battlefield in an impenetrable globe. Torches sputter into nothing. Magical light is swallowed if it's too weak, and vision itself collapses to the black. To outsiders, it looks like a pure sphere of void, but to those inside, it's nothing but endless night. Imagine a battlefield at twilight, where blood stains the earth. The Hunger's Chosen kneels beside a mortally wounded ally, but instead of divine light, it's a cold needle and dark thread that pulls flesh back together. Then, as enemies close in, they inhale deeply, and the glow of lanterns and spells alike are pulled into their mouth with Swallow Light. A cone of icy shadows erupts forward, staggering their foes. And when reinforcements arrive, a final prayer cloaks the entire field in darkness, an orb of pure void where only the hungry predator knows how to move. At level 3, the Hunger's Chosen is no longer just a predator, they are also a surgeon of shadows, keeping themselves alive through grim pragmatism while dragging others down into the void. By 4th level, the Hunger's Chosen sinks deeper into the mind. Orgresh's hunger gnaws at the body, but now the psyche begins to unravel as well. The whispers of the infinite eye sharpen into visions, glimpses of futures yet unwoven, threads of possibility twisting through their thoughts. To others, it's madness. To them, it's clarity born of hunger. In their story, this is the stage where their faith and psychic awakening fully intertwine. The cleric who once tore the flesh of enemies now tears at their minds, setting thought itself ablaze with void-tainted insight. This is when the class feat basic psychic spellcasting comes online, granting them more psychic spells and expanding their casting breadth. It's a natural synergy, divine hunger fueling occult flame. They also take up battle medicine, letting them patch up allies in the middle of combat. Even though this act feels a bit clinical, precise, and a little unsettling when performed by hands that were just minutes earlier weaving together flesh and void. On the cleric side of things, they claim Death Kneel, a spell that lets them harvest the final breath of a dying enemy to gain temporary strength and hit points. Nothing says Orgresh louder than killing as a form of sustenance. On the psychic side of things, they unlock Scorching Blast, a raw lance of flame conjured from thought alone. For a moment, their hunger burns outward, turning psychic clarity into destructive fire. Picture a crumbling shrine, enemies closing in with blades drawn. The Hunger's Chosen presses a bloody hand to a companion's chest, their voice flat as they whisper a quick battle medicine prayer, stitching life back into the body with ruthless precision. Then their gaze snaps to a foe who staggers on the edge of death. With a single word, Death Kneel tears the soul free, and the cleric inhales the last of its strength, vitality flooding their own veins. Another enemy rises a weapon, but it's too late. Eyes blazing, the cleric thrusts out a hand and unleashes a scorching blast, a psychic inferno born of hunger and will. By level 4, the Hunger's Chosen has become more than just a predator. They are a conduit of excess. They mend flesh in combat, devour life at its final moment, and let their mind itself erupt into fire. At 5th level, the Hunger's Chosen learns the truest form of their faith. Hunger is never satisfied, but it can be fed. Every act of pain inflicted on others becomes a morsel. Every wound tore open becomes sustenance. Now, even the torment they deliver fuels their cursed body, completing the cycle of predator and prey. This is a turning point. They are no longer just an investigator wandering the strange lands of magic. They are a herald of Orgresh, wings black against the sky, feeding on the world's pain and spreading indulgence through devastation. Here, their ability boosts sharpen their focus. Dexterity, constitution, intelligence, and wisdom all rise, reinforcing survivability, spellcasting, and investigative insight. Their skills grow as well. Occultism rises to expert, making them a true scholar of forbidden mysteries, while society becomes trained, reflecting the character's evolving awareness of how mortals structure themselves and how hunger might unravel it. The defining choice here is the ancestry feat, Feed on Pain. Whenever they deal mental damage, they siphon strength from it, healing themselves as though the agony of others is meat and marrow. For a Dhampir Cleric of Orgresh, this is the perfect embodiment of their creed, sustaining themselves on the suffering they inflict upon others. Their spellcasting swells to new heights with third-rank cleric spells. Chilling Darkness unleashes a beam of void and cold energy that scorches living creatures and strikes fear into those who cling to light. It is a ranged strike of pure shadow, lancing out from the hands of a predator. Vampiric Feast channels the most grotesque of blessings, draining life from everyone caught in its area and funneling that vitality directly into the caster. It's a macabre prayer, both mass attack and feast in one. Imagine a battlefield strewn with broken stone and screaming foes. The Hunger's Chosen stands tall, wings spread, eyes burning. They lift a hand, and chilling darkness streaks across the field, piercing a paladin's shining armor with a lance of pure void. As their enemies rally, the cleric throws their arms wide and unleashes Vampiric Feast. Shadows surging outwards, ripping vitality from every living body in reach. As soldiers crumple, their wounds close, their breath steadies, their hunger quiets for just a moment. And with every scream echoing in the dark, their body knits itself together, stronger than before. At level 5, the Hunger's Chosen becomes the perfect image of Orgresh's will. A cleric who heals not through prayer, but through pain. An indulgent predator who feasts on the life and sanity of others to keep their own hunger at bay. With the first 5 levels behind us, it's time to see how the Hunger's Chosen measures up when we drop them into our party roll rubric. At this stage, the scores land at Defender 2 stars, Striker 3 stars, Blaster 3 stars, Controller 2 stars, Support 2 stars, Healer 2 stars, Scout 0 stars, Face 0 stars, and Solver 3 stars. So, where do they shine? The Hunger's Chosen comes out best in 3 places. As a striker, their kit is lean but effective. Chilling Darkness hits hard on a single target, and Vampiric Feast doubles as both damage and sustain. They don't have the endless swings of a true martial, but when they choose to strike, it lands. As a blaster, they gain access to area damage earlier than most casters of their theme. Swallow Light and Vampiric Feast both widen their reach, damaging groups while feeding the void inside. And as a solver, they excel outside of combat. With expert occultism, detect magic, arcane sense, and a broad spell toolkit, they're the ones who spot magical traps, decipher occult texts, and recognize threats before they unfold. The secondary package is useful, though less consistent. As a controller, they can weaken enemies with Enfeeble, deny sightlines with Darkness, and occasionally reposition with Void Warp. Their support leans pretty indirect. Mystic Armor, Guidance, and Frenzied Revelry can keep the party on its feet, even though it's not flashy. And as a healer, they're self-sufficient above all. Stitch Flesh, Battle Medicine, and life-draining magic keep themselves going, with allies as a secondary concern. They won't replace a dedicated healer, but they're not going to leave their group completely stranded either. So what does this actually mean in play at the table? The Hunger's Chosen pulls weight in damage, blasting, and problem solving, giving the party a tool for high bursts and knowledge-heavy challenges. But the cost is clear. They aren't keeping the front line safe, and they aren't talking their way past guards. If your group already has a tank and a face, this character thrives, sliding in as the shadowy caster who makes fights shorter and mysteries simpler. If the group lacks these roles, though, the Hunger's Chosen forces the party into darker playstyles, fights fought on their terms, in darkness with enemies drained dry rather than out-dueled. They're not versatile across every job, but the jobs they do fill, they fill with a very hungry edge. It's also worth noting that small shifts in earlier decisions could have reshaped these rankings. Taking Strix Defender as our ancestry feat could have shored up AC and survivability at the cost of mental saves. Swapping Arcane Sense for Risky Surgery could have nudged them earlier into a more medic type role, and dropping Harm as a prepared spell, since it already comes from the Divine Font, could have opened room for some more control or support spells instead. So at level 5, the Hunger's Chosen is best described as a predatory hybrid. Part Striker, part Blaster, part Solver, backed by grim support tools and battlefield trickery. A party doesn't lean on them for defense or diplomacy, but when it's time to solve problems or feed the hunger, they're the ones they turn to. At 6th level, the Hunger's Chosen draws closer to Orgresh than ever before. Their faith no longer soothes, it wounds. Each utterance of harm now strikes deeper, leaving enemies staggering and hollow as if void itself has bitten into their flesh. This mechanical change is due to the feat Harming Hands, sharpening every use of harm into a more brutal strike of divine hunger. And through automatic writing, their pen becomes a vessel for revelations not their own, scrawling prophecies dredged from beyond. Answers arrive as if they were pulled from the void itself. Disturbing, but useful. Their magic also broadens. Agonizing despair floods minds with hopelessness, dealing mental damage and leaving foes frightened, their courage stripped away. Loose Time's arrow twists the battlefield by quickening allies, granting them extra steps and strides to reposition, flank, or escape. It doesn't make them stronger, but it does make them faster. And for a servant of hunger, that speed sets the table for the kill. A zealot charges across the forest floor, blades risen. The Hunger's Chosen meets them with a surge of void energy, harming hands tearing deeper than flesh should allow. Then a twitch of their wrist, time itself snaps, the rogue ally blurs forward with Loose Time's arrow circling for the flank. And as enemies gather, a whisper of agonizing despair crawls into their minds, and courage rots into fear. At level 6, the Hunger's Chosen embodies Orgresh's creed. Faith that harms, prophecy that guides, and time itself bent to serve the feast. By 7th level, the Hunger's Chosen doesn't just whisper to Orgresh. They weaponize their prayers. Their voice is a sermon of suffering, each syllable gnawing at the will of those who hear it. Here, religion rises to master proficiency, making them an unmatched authority on rites, cults, and divine power, a font of knowledge in and out of combat. And with the feat Battle Prayer, their worship becomes consistent. Every clash, every swing, every desperate breath carries the cadence of their devotion. letting their faith flow directly into the hymn of battle. Their spellcasting grows darker with 4th rank cleric spells. Enervation lashes in a line of negative energy, sapping life force and leaving foes weakened. Even when it doesn't kill, it inflicts a lingering drain that cuts into maximum health, setting enemies up for a slower, more inevitable death. Sanguine Mist conjures a roiling fog of blood that gnaws the living while feeding the caster. It creates concealment on the battlefield, making movement uncertain, while repeatedly damaging enemies and rewarding the cleric with temporary vitality drawn straight from their prey. In a ruined cathedral, the Hunger's Chosen lifts a finger, and enervation rips through a line of paladins, their armor rattling as blood seeps and strength withers. A chant rises, low, guttural, unending, and the air thickens into sanguine mist. Within the crimson haze, silhouettes falter, blows swing wide, and every scream gifts the cleric with another breath of stolen vitality. Their prayers no longer just echo, they devour. At level 7, the Hunger's Chosen faith is pain incarnate. Spoken words that wither, fog that feasts, devotion that never stops cutting. The Hunger's Chosen rises above a mere wandering preacher at 8th level. Their devotion and appetite earn them more of Orgresh's power, expanding their dominion over indulgence and hunger. They're no longer just a vessel. They're becoming a recognized voice amongst the faithful, a name whispered in the darker corners of shrines and feast halls. Mechanically, they claim the feat Advanced Domain Indulgence. Their connection to Orgresh deepens, granting them new focus spells that echo the ravenous excess of their god. Their faith doesn't just harm, it tempts, overfeeds, and corrupts. They also pick up Sacred Defense, hardening their faith into resilience, proof against the very afflictions and poisons that might topple lesser devotees. Their spellcasting broadens even further. Dhampir Maiden summons a spectral figure who clings to a foe, draining their life each round and feeds it back to the caster, a banquet bound in shadow. Deep Sight blackens their eyes, granting them dark vision, or greater dark vision, if we already have it. Darkness is no longer a barrier, it's a home. And Takes Its Course is the new focus spell that Indulgence Domain sharpens into cruel manipulation. It can hasten an ally's recovery from poison or disease, or just as easily make the suffering worse, forcing the affliction forward or intensifying its toil. It's a choice that turns mercy and malice into two sides of the same feast. A poisoned scout collapses at their feet. The Hunger's Chosen kneels, whispering, and with Take Its Course, the affliction is forced to a head, either burned away with a boon of relief or twisted deeper, sending the victim writhing. An enemy stumbles in the dark, but the cleric sees perfectly. Deep Sight cutting through black is easy as daylight. At the center of the chaos, a ghostly vampiric maiden embraces a warrior, draining his lifeblood into the cleric's veins. Even as blows rain down, Sacred Defense steadies their form, a bulwark forged of hunger and faith. The Hunger's Chosen doesn't just serve Orgresh, they embody indulgence itself, shielding, all-seeing in shadow, and twisting the line between aid and cruelty into a manner of appetite. At 9th level, the Hunger's Chosen stops merely using darkness and starts living in it. Their edges blur in torchlight. Their footsteps are just but a rumor. Hunger is no longer just a creed. It's a climate around them. Here, occultism rises to master proficiency, so riddles of the Eldritch stop being puzzles and start being procedures. They don't guess at mysteries anymore, they strategically take them apart. Their ancestry seals the vibe with slip into shadow. In dim light or darkness, they can melt away and reappear where the shadows will them, turning corners into exits and gloom into armor. It's not about vanishing for spectacle, It's about picking the angle that ends the fight. Their prayers grow crueler too, with 5th rank cleric magic that weaponizes desperation. Ravening Maw doesn't throw teeth at the enemy, it puts the teeth in their mind. You brand a creature with a compulsive, cannibal hunger. If there's a dying or dead body nearby, they're pushed towards wasting 2 actions to feast, or they bleed mental damage each round for resisting the urge. On a crowded field, or a field you just helped crowd, this is a brutal fork. Burn actions and morals on a compass, or suffer. And if they choose a dying ally, it finishes them. It's control through revulsion, and it breaks formations. Blackfinger's Blades is your opening bell. For a brief window, you and your allies' weapons are poison-kissed. 1 clean hit per blade delivers giant scorpion venom keyed to your spell DC. It's perfect for a synchronized first volley. The ranger tags a priority target, the rogue seals a sneak, and you glide in from shadow and add a poisoned finisher. The effect is sharp, and decisive. The skirmish has gone ugly. 2 bodies lie in the nave. Another enemy reels at the edge of death. From a column of darkness, the cleric steps out, and with a soft, almost loving word, brands the enemy captain with ravening maw. He falters, eyes flickering to his fallen comrade. He could gorge and stand stronger, or hold the line and feel his mind gnaw itself raw. Across the aisle, blades whisper. The party's weapons gleam with Blackfinger's blades as they surge for the strike. The cleric takes 1 step backward and is simply gone. Slip into shadow pulls them into the opaque gloom. A heartbeat later, they unfold from the rafters behind the captain. Hunger smiling, where a face should be. At level 9, the Hunger's Chosen is a predator of choices. They don't just hit hard, they force worse decisions, spend actions feeding on the dead, suffer for restraint, or stagger under a poisoned opening while the cleric swims through the dark. At level 10, the Hunger's Chosen is more than a servant. They're a missionary of appetite. Every step spreads Orgresh's creed into new corners of the world. Their shadow carrying whispers of feasts both endless and ruinous. Where they walk, hunger follows, and with it, temptation. This growth is steady and deliberate. Dexterity, constitution, intelligence, and wisdom all climb, shoring up agility, resilience, knowledge, and spellcasting alike. This isn't raw specialization. It's a widening of the feast, keeping every part of the cleric sharp enough to devour what's before them. They gain stealth training, making their forays into shadow even more dangerous. Now, when they vanish into darkness, they're not just unseen, they're unheard. A predator whose silence says more than a sermon. Their devotion to Orgresh blooms wider through the feat expanded domain initiate, Indulgence. More focused powers of gluttony, compulsion, and excess slide into their hands, letting them twist enemies with temptation or overwhelm them with overindulgence. Their god isn't a one-note hunger, it's a symphony of appetites, and the cleric conducts it with glee. Their spellcasting sharpens with 5th rank cleric spells. Inevitable disaster curses an enemy with looming misfortune, causing their next failure to twist into catastrophe. It's the embodiment of Orgresh's doctrine. Resistance only makes the feast messier. Their new focus spell, Overstuff, feeds into the indulgence domain, forcing the target to gorge beyond capacity, sickening them while leaving them sluggish and weak. For Orgresh, even too much isn't enough. On a village green, the Hunger Chosen speaks a curse, and a duelist confident parry unravels into a full-blown stumble. Inevitable disaster punishing the smallest mistake. Another guard clutches their gut, gagging and staggering, as overstuff drives them past their body's limits. Orgresh's hunger spilling into flesh and stomach alike. The cleric slides into the shade of the hall, the crowd searching in vain. Silence and shadow cloak them now, stealth turning them into a whisper of predation. When rising to 10th level, the Hunger's Chosen becomes more than predator. They are preacher and plague, spreading Orgresh's hunger as gospel, reshaping both battlefields and hearts into altars of excess. The Hunger's Chosen has evolved from a devout predator into a full-blown embodiment of Orgresh's creed. Harm is faith, indulgence is weapon, and hunger is truth. Now that we've gone through 10 levels, let's run them through the party roll rubric to see where the stars settle. Defender is 2 stars. Striker, 3 stars. Blaster, 4 stars. Controller, 3 stars. Support, 3 stars. Healer, 2 stars. Scout, 1 star. Face, 0 stars. And Solver, 4 stars. By this point, the Hunger's Chosen has perfected the art of hurting things creatively. As a blaster, their magic is now viciously efficient. Sanguine Mist and Vampiric Maiden stack area control and damage, while Inevitable Disaster turns a single mistake into catastrophe. Persistent damage, fright, and drain ripple across the field. And Overstuff, or Ravening Maw, twists the aftermath into grotesque sustain. It's not about damage numbers, it's about forcing the enemy to bleed, panic, and crumble in sequence. Their solver role, however, has quietly become just as potent. With Master Occultism, Automatic Writing, and Deep Sight, they're a walking archive of hidden truths. They can read the battlefield's magic, interpret strange relics, and even divine outcomes through writing trances. In exploration and investigation, few characters at this level keep up with their breadth of insight. As a controller, the Hunger's Chosen manipulates movements and morale through effects like Enervation, Darkness, and Ravening Maw. Few enemies keep composure under that cocktail of blindness, drain, and hunger. Their support grows more deliberate. Loose Time's arrow lets allies reposition, Take Its Course can cure or curse at will, and Overstuff disrupts key foes mid-fight. They can play the table like a cruel conductor, tightening pressure and momentum for their allies. As a striker, their focus is still solid. Harm scales higher thanks to Harming Hand, and when combined with poison strikes from Blackfinger's blades or the reach of Vampiric Maiden, they maintain burst potential without ever actually needing a weapon in their hands. At this stage, the Hunger's Chosen is a predatory support caster, thriving when paired with tanks and marshals who can keep the attention off them. They're the tide that turns a fair fight into a slaughter, forcing choices between pain, panic, and poison. They're also the party's investigator, able to read omens, pierce darkness, and untangle curses others cannot. But they remain weak as a face, silent, unsettling, and rarely welcome in polite company. Their defender and healer roles haven't changed much either. They protect only through deterrence and heal only by consuming. Put them alongside a frontliner and a true healer though, and they flourish. The quiet shadow behind the feast, ensuring every fight ends in excess. A few different choices between levels 6 and 10 could reshape their role spread. Swapping Automatic Writing for Recognized Spell would emphasize battlefield awareness over divination, leading harder into control. Choosing Quick Recognition instead of Sacred Defense could further improve the controller role. Focusing spell preparation on Heroism, Death Ward, or Dispel Magic could pivot them towards support rather than blaster. Alternatively, replacing Ravening Maw with a more straightforward damage spell could keep the theme but simplify control, bumping striker consistency. As stands, the Hunger's Chosen is a blaster controller hybrid with uncanny problem solving and thematic dominance over hunger, temptation, and decay. They don't balance the party, they distort it, bending every encounter towards indulgence and collapse. At 11th level, the Hunger's Chosen faith evolves into something truly paradoxical. A healer who harms to heal. Their sermons no longer end at the edge of pain, they expand into the salvation for those brave enough to embrace it. In the dim light of forgotten temples, they open their arms to the afflicted, their magic spreading like an unholy benediction across every disciple gathered before them. Here, their medicine skill rises to expert, and they take the ward medic feat. What was once an eerie form of self-surgery becomes something far more communal. Now, they can tend to several patients at once. A dark congregation healed together, united under the same whispered rites of blood and restoration. Their divine power continues to deepen, gaining access to 6th rank cleric spells that feel less like miracles and more like disasters tamed. Ravenous darkness creates a churning void that swallows light and bleeds shadows, harming all within it while concealing its caster in total night. To the faithful, it's not a hazard. It's a cathedral of living hunger. Vampiric Exsanguination releases a shockwave of life-draining energy, striking every creature nearby and converting their vitality into the cleric's own strength. It's mass harm, mass healing, and mass awe rolled all into one. A cult kneels in a ruined chapel as the cleric raises their hand. The torches extinguish at once. Ravenous darkness spreads, devouring light and sound alike. Within the black, screams echo and a single pulse of crimson radiates outward. Vampiric Exsanguination. When the silence falls, the wounded gasp awake, wounds closed and blood returned, while the heretics who stood against the faith lie pale and empty. The Hunger's Chosen isn't just a harbinger of Orgresh's hunger. They are now a shepherd of it, turning agony into restoration and darkness into sanctuary. At 12th level, the Hunger's Chosen learns to channel their vampiric hunger not only through divine invocation, but through thought itself. The line between faith and mind fades. Hunger no longer needs words, it pulses directly from their will. Mechanically, they have gained the expert psychic spellcasting feat, deepening their connection to their psychic discipline. Their mind becomes as sharp as their faith, allowing them to push further into occult manipulation and amplify their existing psychic arsenal. Paired with the skill feat Continual Recovery, their medical mastery becomes more efficient, reducing downtime between treatments. Whether patient or victim, those who fall under their care recover, or at least stop screaming, much faster. Their spells expand in two directions that perfectly mirror their dual nature. Spirit Blast from their cleric abilities lets them unleash a burst of spiritual force, tearing at the essence rather than the body. It's direct, clean, and devastating, a pure expression of divine disintegration. Their psychic spellcasting, however, manifests as Vampiric Maiden, once again, but through their psychic focus. And this time, instead of being fueled by ritual, it's fueled by will. The shadowy maiden returns stronger, feeding not just on life, but on thought, dragging enemies into a psychic embrace that drains both body and mind. In the silence of a crypt, a bandit lunges, only to stop mid-step, eyes wide, as invisible forces tear through its soul. Spirit Blast cutting deeper than any blade. Above him, the familiar shape of the Vampiric Maiden coalesces, this time conjured not by spell, but by thought, her arms of shadow tightening until he goes limp. As the cleric opens their eyes, the air hums with quiet, alien stillness, and another wound on their arm closes almost instantly, Continual Recovery making the act of healing feel disturbingly natural. The Hunger's Chosen perfects the fusion of body, blood, and mind, an oracle of hunger who no longer needs to speak to make the world bleed. By 13th level, Orgresh's favor transcends the mortal boundaries of light and shadow. The Hunger's Chosen, once a creature of darkness and secrecy, now carries that same consuming appetite under the sun. The curse of hunger becomes a blessing. Their god demands that nothing, not even daylight, deny the feast. Their medicine skill here rises to master proficiency, reinforcing their role as the physician of both body and decay. Their knowledge of autonomy borders on artistry, and when paired with divine insight, few afflictions can resist their hands. Their Daywalker ancestry feat manifests as the clearest sign of transformation. Their flesh no longer recoils from sunlight, and the world's warmth no longer burns. What once banished them from daylight now simply reveals them, pale, radiant, in a cruel parody of holiness. The Hunger's Chosen has evolved beyond simple mortality. They are a devout predator who no longer needs to hide. Their new 7th rank cleric spells echo this evolution in scope and theme. Eclipse Burst blots out the sun with a wave of void and shadow, dealing searing darkness that punishes the living while protecting the devout within its umbral reach. It's both a battlefield purge and a declaration. Daylight itself now kneels. Execute delivers divine judgment through perilous precision, ending a weakening foe with the weight of Orgresh's will. It's not mercy, it's inevitability. A band of hunters chases the cleric into the morning hills, expecting their quarry to burn. Instead, the light fades. Eclipse Burst unfurls, the sun swallowed by divine shadow. Their shouts turn to gasps as the air crackles with black radiance, and the cleric strides through the dim haze unharmed. One kneeling survivor meets their gaze just long enough to whisper a prayer before Execute silences him, the god of hunger answering through a single, merciful final act. The Hunger's Chosen becomes the impossible, a creature of darkness who walks beneath the sun. No longer confined to shadow, their hunger now burns eternal, a devotion that neither day nor death can deny. When reaching 14th level, the Hunger's Chosen has become a legend whispered in cellars and catacombs, a living saint among the dark, societies that thrive beneath polite civilization. Their sermons are no longer solitary, they are gatherings. Candles burn black, wine turns to blood, and every table becomes an altar to Orgresh's gospel of indulgence and decay. Here they gain the class feat Domain Focus, letting them draw even more deeply from the divine reservoirs of their patron. The Indulgence domains grows hungrier, granting them additional focus points and letting them sustain the twisted miracles of excess longer than ever before. Their faith, now overflowing, becomes an inexhaustible banquet of corruption. The skill feat Schooled in Secrets expands their influence beyond the cult's inner circle. The Hunger's Chosen knows how to navigate forbidden networks, smugglers, black market relic dealers, and underground priests, and can pull information from the hidden world with ease. This isn't about curiosity, it's about control. Their new magic is pure predation. Devouring Void, the air riddles with rips, hungry tears in space. On cast, and the first sustain each round, living creatures in the area take void damage, a brutal pulse that repeats as long as you keep the rift breathing. Try to sprint out, and you risk stumbling at the edge, a reflex gate that can flat out disrupt the move. It pins enemies beneath stand and suffer, or flee and fall. Blood Feast allows our head to split into an enormous vertical maw, and you lunge, a spell attack that sinks for heavy piercing if it hits, then stitches your face shut like nothing happened. You bask in temporary HP equal to half the damage. On a crit, the target also bleeds. Miss, and the hunger snaps shut on air. It's a single target executioner, not a cone, made to delete a problem and keep you standing. In the catacombs, the cleric whispers and the chamber puckers. Devouring Void flowers, space chewing inward. A zealot bolts for the edge, but the terror catches his step. The reflex check fails, his escape disrupted, and another pulse of void eats the breath from his lungs when the cleric sustains. Across the stones, a lieutenant raises a wand. The cleric's face splits. Blood feast snaps shut around his throat. He drops, the cleric's flesh suturing smooth as they drink in the temporary HP, eyes bright with borrowed life. The Hunger's Chosen isn't merely welcomed by the cults below. They're necessary. They control space, punish flight, and end linchpins in one bite, all while their faith keeps the banquet going. By 15th level, the Hunger's Chosen has ascended from prophet to legend. Healers whisper their name with envy. Heretics speak it with awe. Pilgrims don't come for mercy, they come for results. And they leave with new stitches and old sins cauterized. Their medicine reaches legendary proficiency, and legendary medic turns their craft into practical miracles. Faster triage, steadier hands, and the kind of battlefield recoveries that make witnesses swear they saw time reverse. The attribute boosts, Dex, Con, Intelligence, and Wisdom, keep the chassis nimble, durable, and razor clear for both divine and psychic work. Their 8th rank magic sharpens into 2 surgical instruments. Devour Life, a brutal one-target execution tool that slams a creature with massive negative energy. If it drops them, they die outright, and the cleric heals for half of the damage dealt, with any overflow as temporary HP. It's a precision harvest. Pick the biggest threat, carve out their life, stand taller on the stolen strength. Divine Inspiration is a cool, calm prayer that returns spent power, restoring a 6th rank or lower prepared spell, or a 6th rank or lower spell slot for spontaneous casters. And if the target has a focus pool, it refills focus points as if they had refocused. It's the second wind button your party will beg for at the perfect moment. The champion of a rival cult roars defiance. The cleric simply points. Devour Life detonates through the zealot's chest. He falls dead. The cleric wounds knit, a tide of temporary HP settles over them like a cloak. Without looking back, they touch a trembling ally's brow. Divine Inspiration washes through, restoring a spent spell and refilling sacred focus. The allies' eyes are now clear. The fight isn't over, but now the feast is theirs. The Hunger's Chosen is exactly what the desperate seek, a surgeon of life and loss, ending a threat with one hand while returning strength with the other, and leaving only clean scars where the hunger passed. At this point in their journey, the Hunger's Chosen has crossed the line between healer, harbinger, and executioner. Their power is no longer a question of faith, it's a question of cost. When we run them through the party role rubric, here's where the stars now fall. Defender, 2 stars. Striker, 4 stars. Blaster, 4 stars. Controller, 3 stars. Support, 4 stars. Healer, 4 stars. Scout, 1 star. Face, 0 stars. And Solver, 4 stars. At this point, the Hunger's Chosen channels divine and psychic might into surgical precision. As a striker, spells like Devour Life give them lethal, single target burst. 1 spell, 1 death, 1 feast. Combined with Vampiric Exsanguination and Blood Feast, they can delete priority targets and walk away stronger for it. As a blaster, their area control and damage output stabilize at terrifying consistency. Ravenous Darkness and Devouring Void turn spaces into killing grounds, while Eclipse Burst or Vampiric Maiden make the air even more dangerous to breathe. Their support role rises to meet. Divine Inspiration gives allies back their magic. Take Its Course manipulates afflictions for tactical advantage, and Loose Time's Arrow still provides emergency repositioning. The Hunger's Chosen isn't a buffer, they're a resource manager. They decide who keeps fighting and who gets fed to the hungry void. For the first time, Healer shines as more than self-sustain. With legendary medicine, ward medic, and continual recovery, they can triage a full squad between fights and stabilize allies mid-combat faster than most clerics using magic. They're not kind about it, but they are efficient. As a controller, their battlefield impact remains high. Ravening Maw forces grotesque moral decisions, Devouring Void locks enemies in pain or risk, and Eclipse Burst shapes terrain as much as it punishes the living. They manipulate the flow of a fight, not through walls or zones, but through fear. Solver stays strong thanks to their mastery of occultism, medicine, and automatic writing. They're a walking tome of forbidden lore, capable of diagnosing curses, unraveling psychic residue, or reading a god's mood through bloodstains. The Hunger's Chosen has become the party's dark backbone, a figure who controls pace, tempo, and survival in equal measure. They're the ones who end the boss before the heal check, restores the wizard's last big spell, and patches the barbarian with surgical precision while whispering doctrine under their breath. They work best in parties that can protect them up close. Frontline defenders or tactical strikers who draw heat while the cleric sculpts the fight from mid-range. Their presence also amplifies resource-heavy groups. Kineticists, casters, or alchemists thrive under their constant refueling. Still, they remain voids in diplomacy and stealth. The face roll is non-existent, and scout remains very weak. They don't infiltrate, they arrive. And when they do, the entire tone of the table changes. A few choices could have shifted the way that their roles played out. Replacing Legendary Medic with Toughness or Die Hard could lead them slightly more Defender, though at thematic cost. Investing in Diplomacy or Deception instead of Stealth could have introduced a twisted face angle, the preacher who seduces before he devours. All in all, the Hunger's Chosen stands as a surgical engine of faith, equal parts healer and executioner, provider and plague. The Saint of Scars doesn't balance a party, they complete it, feeding its strength one soul at a time. 16 levels in, the Hunger's Chosen stands at the threshold of true divine mastery. The font of Orgresh's power, the endless well of hunger and healing, no longer demands effort. It simply flows. Each invocation, each whispered prayer spills over with dreadful efficiency. Their god's energy no longer needs to be channeled, it erupts through them. Here they gain the feat Fast Channel, allowing them to cast their divine font spells with astonishing speed. No wasted motion, no delay, just immediate release of void. Harm and healing alike come as reflexes now, a natural extension of will. Alongside this, the risky surgery feat refines their medical savagery. They can inflict pain as the first step of mending, cutting deeper to heal better. The Gospel of Orgresh has never been so literal. Their magic turns cruelty precise. Canticle of Everlasting Grief is a private hymn of despair that deals heavy mental damage and curses the target, stripping away comfort of status and circumstance bonuses. On a weak mind, the fear lingers, days, weeks, or forever, and that curse can even spill to nearby allies. It's not just pain, it's a long, quiet collapse of hopes. Then comes Awaken Entropy. You accelerate decay in a growing zone. Each turn inside risks damage on a basic fortitude save, and every time you sustain, the zone expands and the damage die steps up, d6 to d8 to d10 to d12, turning the area into an ever-worsening grind of rot. Constructs, undead, immortals, entropy wears them all away. A Flailings locks shields. The cleric exhales. Fast Channel lashes a quick harm through the line before the first step lands. Their gaze fixes on the captain, a sound only he can hear unspools. The Canticle of Everlasting Grief, and his guard drops as courage and bonuses flee with it. Around them, stone begins to age. Banners slump. Metal powders. Awaken Entropy spreads, the radius swelling and the damage climbing with each sustain. In the lull, an ally gasps. Steel in their ribs, and the cleric smiles faintly. Risky surgery, drawing a line of blood to give the body back to itself. The fight doesn't surge, it withers, and hunger wins by waiting. The Hunger's Chosen embodies effortless excess, fast font, weaponized despair, and a battlefield that gets worse simply because they decided it should. At 17th level, the Hunger's Chosen connection to Orgresh has turned utterly paradoxical. What once nourished now starves. What once healed now harms. The flow of divine energy reverses in their veins. Faith itself becomes a weapon of attrition. They are no longer the priest who mends the body. They are the surgeon who proves that pain is the body's truest language. Their religion skill ascends to legendary proficiency, marking them as one of the foremost interpreters of divine law and heresy alike. They also gain the Twist Healing Ancestry feat, a reflection of their corruption so deep that it changes the rules of their god's gift. Now, any item meant to heal instead deals harm when they use it, a permanent inversion of divine mercy. For others, a potion is recovery. For them, it's poison sanctified. Their new magic rises to its most ruthless form with 9th rank cleric spells. Massacre, a single word of unmaking, dealing immense damage to multiple creatures in an area. Those slain by it don't simply die. They are consumed by divine absence, their vitality folded back into the void that spawned them. It's the prayer of ending, and the Hunger's Chosen speaks it fluently. Then there's Undertaker, an unholy blessing that transformed the cleric into the perfect instrument of death's will. Their presence reaps what lingers. The dying are drawn towards finality, and even the living feel the pull of the grave. The battlefield becomes a mausoleum, and the cleric its custodian. The Hunger's Chosen steps through the aftermath of battle, hands trailing over fallen soldiers. Each touch burns instead of heals, Twist Healing turning balm into blight. As their enemies regroup, a single resonant phrase escapes their lips: massacre. And an entire rank crumbles in silence, their life snuffed out mid-breath. The survivors stagger, faces pale, as the cleric's shadow lengthens. With a whispered benediction, Undertaker settles over them, and the dying feel themselves welcomed home. The Hunger's Chosen becomes the embodiment of Orgresh, a healer who brings harm, a savior who ends suffering through annihilation. Their faith no longer redeems, it consumes. At 18th level, the Hunger's Chosen power transcends the limits of their own voice. Every invocation, every curse, every scream of pain they draw out lingers, an aftershock of divine malice that ripples across reality. Their hunger has learned to echo. This manifests through the feat Echoing Channel, allowing them to unleash the power of their divine font twice in a single burst of devotion, whether it's harm, healing, or something in between. When they call upon Orgresh, their faith reverberates, doubling the reach and deepening the devastation. Paired with the skill feat Divine Guidance, their instincts sharpen to perfect clarity, letting them sense the right prayer or intervention at the precise, most terrible moment. Their spellcasting continues to improve as it reaches towards penultimate horror. Ferocious Gestalt conjures a fusion of devouring forms, a grotesque avatar of Orgresh's hunger. This Gestalt draws power from nearby creatures, feeding upon vitality, force, or even essence itself to empower the caster. The longer it remains, the more it takes. A manifestation of appetite given structure. An enemy warlord laughs as the cleric raises a hand, then stops laughing when a single harm detonates twice, the second wave crashing through his lines as Echoing Channel repeats the first strike without warning. The cleric doesn't move. doesn't speak. Ferocious gestalt simply forms behind them, a shimmering outline of teeth, limbs, and need. The creature feeds, siphoning the strength of every survivor, its energy flowing back into its master with each pulse. Around them, even the air trembles. Every word of faith now carries an aftertaste of hunger. The Hunger's Chosen has become more than a servant of their god. They are a resonant instrument of appetite itself. Every prayer devours, every echo consumes, and silence is just the space between meals. At 19th level, the Hunger's Chosen discovers the cruelest mercy of all: the power to consume the suffering of others. They no longer just feed on life or pain. They take on the weight of despair, swallowing agony whole so that their allies might stand again. To the untrained eye, it looks like compassion. To those who know better, it's hunger refined into empathy's disguise. Their occultism skill reaches legendary proficiency, crowning them as true scholars of invisible forces, a theologian of entropy itself. They also gain the comforting presence feat, allowing them to steady allies by absorbing their fear, pain, and negative conditions into themselves. It's both shield and sacrifice, taking the poison from another's blood, only to let it ferment within their own. Their divine magic peaks in fortitude and faith with a 10th rank cleric spell. Indestructibility transforms them into a living bastion of divine endurance. For the spell's duration, they become nearly impossible to kill. Their body wreathed in divine force, their will beyond mortal reach. Every wound mends as it's made, every blow simply absorbed into the godly hunger that sustains them. The battle turns. A companion, crushed beneath an ogre's strike, gasps in panic, their skin paling from poison and despair alike. The Hunger's Chosen kneels beside them, whispering words that sound like comfort, though they taste like blood. Comforting presence ripples outward, and the allies' pain flows into the cleric's body like ink in water. The poison burns their veins, but they smile. As the enemy closes in, indestructibility flares, blades shatter, magic breaks, and the cleric rises, radiant and unyielding, carrying every hurt the party could not bear. The Hunger's Chosen has become more than a mortal, a vessel of living penance. Their faith no longer takes from others for their own gain, it consumes suffering to sustain everyone around them. The hunger has evolved beyond need. It has become purpose. At the final level, the Hunger's Chosen achieves what their god promised from the start: the seamless union of body, mind, and appetite. Their faith no longer manifests through ritual or prayer. It is their thought. Hunger and will have become one continuous force, devouring the boundaries between psychic and the divine. Here they attain master psychic spellcasting, achieving full dominance over their second magical tradition. Their mind now channels hunger directly. No holy symbols, no words, no gestures. Thought alone is invocation. The calm and centered feat mirrors this mastery, giving them the serenity to sustain that power even amid chaos. Where once their hunger was wild, now it is precise, patient, deliberate, eternal. Their final spell, Quandary, is the perfect expression of that control. With a thought, they fracture a creature's mind into recursive indecision, trapping it in loops of conflicting choices. Each round, the victim struggles against its own will, unsure whether to fight, flee, or freeze. It's not pain, nor fear, it's the slow digestion of intent itself. A would-be godling descends upon the field, radiant and unchallenged. The Hunger's Chosen doesn't raise their weapon or their voice, they simply look. Reality wavers, Quandary unfolds, the godling falters mid-swing, caught in an endless loop of thought. Each decision feeding into the next until action itself dissolves. Around them, the cleric exhales, their aura calming, unwavering. The hunger no longer howls. It waits. Infinite, inevitable, and satisfied. The Hunger's Chosen transcends faith and flesh alike. They have devoured their doubts, their morality, and even their need to struggle. What remains is pure purpose, a will sharpened to a single truth. Everything hungers, and through that hunger, all things are made whole. At the pinnacle of their evolution, the Hunger's Chosen is no longer a mortal cleric with psychic potential. They are hunger incarnate, wielding divine inevitability and mental precision in equal measure. The feast is complete. The faith perfected. Here's how their roles finally settle according to our party role rubric. Defender, 3 stars. Striker, 5 stars. Blaster, 5 stars. Controller, 4 stars. Support, 5 stars. Healer, 5 stars. Scout, 1 star. Face, 1 star. And Solver, 5 stars. At level 20, the Hunger's Chosen exists in perfect balance between offense and renewal. As a striker, they reach terrifying efficiency, devour life and massacre, end fights with single actions. Ferocious Gestalt and Blood Feast feed their vitality mid-combat, and Fast Channel or Echoing Channel double the devastation with minimal effort. When they choose a target, that creature doesn't just die, it vanishes from the story. Their blaster power peaks as entropy itself becomes their ally. Awaken Entropy and Devouring Void erode entire encounters, while Eclipse Burst and Canticle of Everlasting Grief deliver emotional and physical ruin in tandem. Their damage isn't always immediate. Sometimes it's the dread of knowing the next turn will be worse. Healer and support finally share the stage, perfectly intertwined. With Legendary Medicine, Fast Channel, and Echoing Channel, they can patch entire parties with surgical precision, or, when the need arises, twist that same energy back into harm. Divine Inspiration replenishes spent resources, Comforting Presence absorbs ally suffering, and Indestructibility turns them into a walking bulwark. Every moment is a choice between restoration and ruin, and they're perfect at both. As a solver, they transcend typical skill roles. Legendary Occultism, Religion, and Medicine make them the ultimate investigator of the unseen. They can identify curses, diagnose planar rot, or read the pulses of dying worlds. Their insight isn't wisdom, it's appetite with context. Controller remains one of their sharpest secondary roles. With Awaken Entropy, Ferocious Gestalt, and Quandary, they can reshape both the battlefield and the enemy's will. They don't move their opponents by force, they corrode their certainty until movement ceases to matter. Their defender role does quietly improve, though not through armor or shields, but through endurance. Indestructibility makes them nearly impossible to remove, while Comforting Presence lets them absorb blows meant for others in a way a sword and board could never dream of. At these heights, the Hunger's Chosen is less a member of the party and more a force the party survives beside. They are both safety and threat. The healer who kills more efficiently than the striker, the support who drains a field faster than the wizard. They excel in attrition-heavy campaigns, where endurance and resource control define success. They keep casters casting, tanks standing, and enemies dying, often all at once. Their balance between healing, blaster, control, and sustained support makes them the party's dark heart, the rhythm around which every battle turns. Still, they remain a very poor face, unsettling, quiet, their very presence fraying nerves, and a weak scout, since stealth has never mattered to someone who can command the void itself. But on a battlefield or in a crisis, no other role compares. They are faith weaponized, hunger realized, and inevitability given form. Here, at 20th level, the Hunger's Chosen is complete. An apex predator of soul and spirit. They control the pace of every encounter, the flow of every fight, and the lifespan of anyone foolish enough to step into their presence. They are a healer, executioner, and God-touched surgeon in one. The mind that hungers and the hunger that thinks. And that is the Hunger's Chosen. A cleric who began as a curious investigator and ended as hunger incarnate, a vessel of faith so absolute that even their mercy consumes. From the first drip of blood magic to the final silence of a god's thought, this build has always been about one thing: control through appetite. Mechanically, this is a monster of synergy. Divine and psychic spellcasting blend into a toolkit that's as flexible as it is brutal. Self-healing through harm, sustainable resource loops through divine inspiration, and some of the best single-target deletion in Pathfinder 2e. Between Echoing Channel, Fast Channel, and Ferocious Gestalt, your action economy becomes frighteningly efficient, and the legendary medicine backbone means you are never out of tools, whether you're cutting enemies apart or stitching your allies back together. But what really makes the Hunger's Chosen shine is the roleplay space that it opens up. This is not your average healer. This is one who looks their party in the eye and says, "I can save you, but it's gonna hurt." Their faith is a philosophy, their damage a sermon, and their healing a reminder that the line between life and death is just another meal to be portioned. At the table, they work best alongside marshals and mages who can capitalize on the chaos they create. Fast fighters, area controllers, and status-heavy casters who can keep the pressure high while the cleric sustains the field. They aren't a spotlight hog. They are the silent axis the rest of the party spins around. And narratively, they're one of the strongest thematic builds we've ever rolled. Every spell, every feat, every skill choice reinforces the same story. A holy predator who heals through harm and worships through consumption. It's grotesque, it's poetic, and it's perfectly Pathfinder. And that wraps up this entry in the Codex. At Ctrl+Alt+Build, we don't shy away from strange combinations, we celebrate them. We don't fix the chaos the dice give us, we turn it into something legendary. If this build gave you ideas, made you rethink your clerics, or just made you a little uncomfortable in all the right ways, drop a like, hit subscribe, and tell me what god you'd feed next in the comments below. And if you want to see another vampire build taken to the extreme, one who makes even Hunger's Chosen pause in hesitation, check out our Blood Rager Barbarian build right over there. Until next time, control the dice, alt the meta, and build the legend. I've been Nicholas, your virtual GM, and remember, hunger always finds a way.